Hey, friends, welcome to the podcast. You Are Significant, the podcast where you will hear real stories from real people, and we will get down into the truths of your own significance. You were created on purpose for a purpose with seeds of greatness inside of you. Now, let's get down to it. I want to welcome Stephanie Simmons. She's a dear friend of mine. We have been in business together and business partners, business friends, and gone on cruises and trips. And I just absolutely adore her as a sister in the heart. And I'm welcoming you to our You Are Significant stage today, Stephanie. Welcome.
Oh, thank you, Darlene. I am so honored to be a part of this. I truly am. And when you first asked me, I just started praying about what do I really want people to understand. And I think there are a lot of people that will probably resonate with some of the things that I'm going to talk about because my husband and I have had a really long journey. And I will tell you that he is disabled from a brain tumor. It's been at least 3 decades now, and that is a really long time. I met him just 6 months before he was diagnosed. And we have walked this walk with the Lord for all this time. We have learned so many things along the way. We've met so many wonderful people who have just become such fierce prayer warriors for us. And we know without a doubt that after everything that Tim has been through, it is the power of prayer that has sustained us and has kept his body going for all these years. And, the Lord has just been so faithful through thick and thin. And we've just been so blessed by all the people that have truly come in and walked along with us. And I think a lot of people in our lives, we don't always know what we can do for someone. People say, what can I do? What can I do for you? I just had a friend text me that yesterday. And I simply said, just pray. That's what we need is prayer. So I will tell you a little bit about our journey. Um, so with Tim being disabled, we've lived on less for a long time. And we let ourselves just be okay with that, truly okay. And it was hard at times because I'd see people going on trips. I would see them just enjoying some beautiful things. And I was always happy for them. But I always thought, oh, that would be really fun. We couldn't do the things that a lot of people did. We didn't go out to a lot of restaurants. We didn't stay at a lot of hotels. I felt like our hearts were bigger than our pocketbooks. And we just wanted to give more, but we couldn't. And so I actually had two prayers 10 years ago. The first one was truly just to sleep all night because I was very challenged with sleep. I would wake up in the middle of the night, and for the life of me, I could not get back to sleep. My mind would think of everything that I hadn't done the day before. It would think of all the things that I still needed to do the next day. And I just couldn't get back to sleep. So that was my first prayer. My second prayer was for our family to become debt free. And I didn't know how that was going to happen, but I just prayed those prayers because the Lord knew, even if I didn't. And it was by plexus being brought into my life that slowly started to become a reality in both of those accounts. I started sleeping better at night. My body didn't hurt as much. I had so many better days and happier days because the products and eventually the business had come into my life. And I didn't really realize at the time because I was not dreaming very much anymore. I had just stopped dreaming and I didn't really realize that I had done that. But I had a few people say to me, I think you need to start dreaming again. And one even said, I think the Lord has some big plans for you. And I just kept thinking, wow, maybe he does. And I knew that in the big scheme of things, yes, he did. But I did not know that plexus was going to be that answer. So when I started sleeping better and I started sharing immediately, my cousin started 5 days after I did. I had people starting, and I was just borrowing other people's testimonies basically because I didn't have a huge testimony. A lot of people don't struggle with sleep. They don't go, whoa, wait, you're sleeping better? It wasn't as significant to them because they struggled with other issues. But because I was reading other testimonies and hearing about people who had been helped in so many ways, the wheels started turning. And I started thinking, okay, this is a lot bigger than I thought it was. And I just started sharing and just telling people, I don't know if what I have can help you, but look at this person, look at that person. And slowly people started joining us and they shared with people and then they shared and it just kept going. And now I've been sharing products for 10 years. It was 10 years in July. And that has been a long time, but in some ways, it just feels like a couple of years. I mean, it's incredible how you look back and you see all the blessings through the years that because my hands were open to receive, then the blessings came. And I know there's analogies about, holding your hands tightly around the things that you are appreciating and treasuring, but then try to let blessings come into that and they can't. It's like water flowing over your hand. When you open your hand and you're open to receive and you cup your hand, then the water can flow and you can receive those blessings. So that's one thing that I've learned is just not to hold so tightly to things and to realize that the Lord has a plan for all of us. And if we just let that plan unfold, it's so much more beautiful than any of us can even imagine because we're going with His flow and we're going with His plan.
Mm. I love that so much that you are recognizing him and his plan over your life. And, one of the reasons I had thought of you, I believe, and God really brought you to mind one day when I was thinking about who else do I want to invite to be on the podcast. And he brought you to mind, and I've always admired your positive attitude. And I think, when we look at where does true positivity come from that's really heartfelt and lived out consistently, not that there's never a downtime, because then that just wouldn't be human, but that overall always looking for the positive even in the hard situations. That's from your faith in God, and your faith is such a beautiful light, Stephanie.
Thank you. I so appreciate that. And what I've learned too over the years, and this is one of the probably the biggest lessons I've learned is when we're vulnerable and we tell people about the issues that we're dealing with, it's hard to do that because it's so much easier to just keep that stiff upper lip and just keep, you know, steady on. But when you let yourself be vulnerable and you tell people what you're going through, I have been amazed at the number of people that have also been going through hardships. I would have never known that they were
Mhm.
going through those things if I hadn't first told people that I'm struggling and I'm challenged. And I know the Lord wants that for all of us. He wants us to always be in community and lifting each other up in prayer and coming alongside each other, being his hands and feet. Well, if we never allow ourselves to show vulnerability, it never lets others in and it doesn't let them see that this is the walk we're walking right now. It may not be ideal. It may not be anything that we want to be walking through, but it is what He's chosen for us. And we can resist it or we can go with it. And I've
Yeah.
chosen to go with it.
Mhm.
And I feel like there have been so many more blessings because I have chosen to go with it.
Mhm. I think one of the fears of being vulnerable is being judged. And it takes a lot of courage to let someone or let even multiple someones, depending on whether you're sharing this in your Facebook story or whether you're at church and letting, you're standing around and other people are standing around and they hear what you're saying. Um, it takes courage because there may be someone who judges or says something harsh or whatever along those lines. But often, like you said, most people that many times we're thinking their life is perfect. Everything's going smooth. They've got it figured out. And I'm the one over here flopping around like a fish trying to figure out what to do. And actually, they're struggling too. So I think that takes so much courage and it's been part of your growth journey. And once we grow in one area, isn't it a little bit easier to grow on that next step that we are led to take?
100%. And to your point just a minute ago, when you said there may be people who will judge, I would probably argue there will be people who will judge
Mhm,
because that's just human nature to always be trying to figure someone else out and to try to understand. And a lot of people will come to quick decisions on someone and they don't always have the full story. So
mhm,
it's so important when you see somebody struggling or, even if it's somebody in the grocery store and their child is melting or you're just watching somebody walk through something and you think, okay, wow, there has to be more to that story. There
mhm,
usually is.
mhm,
And how beautiful to just come alongside someone and to say, is there some way I can help? Or what can I do for you right now? You
mhm.
know, that is just
Love that
something.
question.
Yeah.
What can I do for you right now?
Yep.
Because a lot of times we don't know what to say. We want to help and we just don't know where to begin the conversation. So, what can I do for you right now? I think that is a powerful question to write down and take away. So,
Absolutely.
so tell us a little bit about, you met Tim, you said 6 months before he was diagnosed. And then so you were already married, you were dating, and then you were married, and then he was diagnosed, or how does that go?
No, we were only dating at the time, and he was diagnosed and he had his first brain surgery, and that was an over 12-hour
Wow.
surgery. That was really long because um, actually, the first one, let me take that back. The first one was to put a shunt in to divert the fluid. It had been building up. It was a craniopharyngioma brain tumor, which was like a cork in a wine bottle, and it had just stopped the spinal fluid from circulating down the spinal column. And so he had tremendous pressure in his brain. And so they put the shunt in, which that saved his life right there. And then 1 month later, over Thanksgiving, that because he was diagnosed in October, then the next month he was in over Thanksgiving, and they actually did a very painstaking surgery to just take out what they thought was brain tumor as much as they could and not touch any sensitive areas of the brain because you can change a person's personality. You can do a lot to a person by just touching the wrong area. So they were very, very careful in that surgery. So he had those two surgeries that fall. We had met in March. Then he had 6 weeks of radiation, 5 days a week the following spring, and then proposed to me when he got done with radiation. And then we got married the following year. So 2 years after we met was when we actually got married. And then we had our son Avery 2 years later, then our son Jacob 2 years after that. And then unfortunately, the brain tumor started growing again while I was expecting Jacob. And then we went to Phoenix for Tim's third and fourth brain surgeries in 2001. So Jacob was 18 months old and Avery was just barely 4 years old. So, any young mamas out there, just think about what it's like to have your children be little, and you can't fully enjoy that time while they're little because you're starting to be a care provider for a loved one, which was my husband. And it's a lot for a person. I was pretty young at the time, and it just felt kind of overwhelming, but I did have very strong faith through my whole life, but I would say that's probably a pivotal moment when my faith just deepened, and
Mhm.
I needed my faith.
Mhm.
I needed to have that happen where I took a deeper walk with the Lord, and that happened for me. So, yeah, my faith has been unshakable, and I would definitely say that through the years, like I said, we didn't have a whole lot, but we still really did have a lot of fun. You can do a lot of things pretty cheaply in this world when you really try to find those fun things. Even if you take a driving vacation instead of flying and you pack a cooler full of food and eat at, a rest stop somewhere or whatever, you don't have to spend a lot of money to still have a good time. And I think our boys had a really nice upbringing regardless, but they still saw a lot of things that Tim went through. And I think it helped to form them into the young men that they are. And they've got such big hearts, and they are a lot of help for Tim and me. So it's been beautiful. Yeah.
Oh, I've met one of your sons, and he's just such a sweetheart, and we had fun when we went miniature golfing and, just had laughed a lot, and I just feel like what I observed in meeting him and getting to be around him is just how much he does appreciate the moment, and, not I think as humans, one of our things we struggle with is unreasonable expectations. And in recovery work, one of the things we talk about with expectations is that expectations are preconceived hurt. And so it seems like maybe in your family, you were able to teach your boys and yourself to have flexibility and not be so rigidly attached to one certain way or one certain outcome, or that things have to be this way to feel this feeling, like we have to go to a restaurant when we're on vacation in order to feel uh, like happy, and instead you were like, no, we can be happy, going on a driving vacation and eat out of a cooler. I grew up that way. Since my dad is a minister, we didn't have a lot of money, but we would take a 2-week trip and go visit our grandparents. That was our vacation. We didn't know people did other kinds of vacations, going to the beach or the mountains or whatever. Like even other families around us where we lived weren't taking those kind of vacations. So we just thought going to see your grandparents in the summer was the normal. And I can remember the bar being across the back seat with like all the clothes and the cooler in the middle with the pillows on top, and my brother on one side and me on the other in the back seat. And we would play cards and we would make funny faces. One time we had a camera and we acted like we were taking pictures of people as they went by, and they made all kinds of faces at us.
I love
And those
that.
are some of my favorite memories of us going on family trips together, so
Oh, we did a lot of that too. And you know what? That is what makes it fun. And those are the good memories. They don't have to cost a lot, like we were saying.
right.
Oh, beautiful. So I will tell you that because I started sharing the products many years ago, the blessings that have flowed have been unbelievable. And we've been able to take our boys on some bigger trips that, they didn't grow up doing any of these things. But then as they got older, I was able to do that big trip to Florida, to the Outer Banks of North Carolina. just different trips, and to bring my mom along with us on so many of these trips. And it has been just priceless to be able to do that and to start to see the world with Plexus, like you said. That was something I never thought that I would do.
Mm,
And just to step back and think of how my life has changed just in the last 10 years
mm,
is unbelievable. And I will tell you that when COVID started, I was able to stop working at the Montessori school I was at and to just be home with Tim. And that has been such a big blessing because he's needed a lot of care over the last 4 years,
mm,
and I've been able to be there. I've been able to be in his hospital room when he's there. I've been able to be at care centers when he's been there. All the appointments that he needs to go to, taking him to PT, different, medical appointments. And I've been the one who has been able to do all of that. If I had a job where I had to leave the home and go to that job every single day, I probably wouldn't have been able to do that. And the Lord knew because He knows the end, even though we don't. He sees what He needs to do along our path in order to just set the scene for what is to come next. So I love that when we're open to whatever direction He is leading us, then those doors open for us. And there's not the resistance like there is if we're always asking why, or we're always just feeling overwhelmed with, now what? Okay, now what? Instead, I've learned to look at the blessings because there are always blessings in everything we do and every challenge that we have. Blessings are always there. We just have to find them.
yeah. Well, as you're telling your story and sharing, it makes me think about, being human. Is there a time that you remember just, doubting yourself and like, why did I choose to be, marry Tim and have 2 boys? And was there ever like this pivotal moment where you just felt like the pressure of being a young mama, raising the boys and in this situation? And if so, like, how did was there like a God moment where you had a thought come or someone came and encouraged you in a special way or something like that?
Yeah, so I will say that the year 2001, when his brain tumor had started growing again, that was probably my most difficult year, just because, like I said, I was young. I had two little boys that weren't even in school yet. And I just remember coming to the end of myself where I just had to say, like, I don't have anything left that I can physically do. And all I can do is lean on the Lord. So that was kind of a breaking point for me where I just had to lean in. And it was a what I could probably say is like you're awake, but it actually feels kind of like you're in a bit of a nightmare
Mm,
where you're just walking through a really hard time and you just don't really know what's going to become of it all, but you just know that he does have you in the palm of his hand, but it's a really hard walk.
mm,
So that's just when you just lean on him and you just know that whatever I'm going to be able to do, it's because he's doing it through me.
mm. Yeah, he's doing it.
Mhm.
Um, that reminds me of another thing that we talk about in recovery, and it's step one, and it's admitting that I am powerless over my tendency to do the wrong thing. And the purpose of that first step is to allow God to begin to take over and be the one who's doing it instead of self trying to always be fixing it or in control or, you know, the one that almost like self. A lot of times we don't realize self is being God in the moment. We just haven't matured enough or come to a moment where it's like, oh my goodness, I cannot do this. And God helps us to realize you can't. You can't do it. You're going to have to relinquish all control over to me. I'm the only way. And really, it is scary. That's, I mean, releasing that control and realizing, you know what, I'm going to have to walk out on faith. It feels like almost that moment when Peter asked to walk out on the water to Jesus, and he walked out and he did take those first steps, and so God will empower us to take those steps. I have thought a lot about Abraham in preparing to move and getting everything packed and putting our house on the market. We've lived here 18 years. This is the only house Joseph, our youngest, has known. And we made an offer on a house this weekend. And definitely, you know, we made the offer last night and wrote up the paperwork. And so getting up this morning, I was like, how do I feel and why do I feel that way? And not just my brain is not me and I'm not my brain. Same thing with my feelings. So it's okay to have feelings, and then those don't have to be my identity or what I'm going to act upon. And so learning that and not letting myself be okay with some fear, but not giving in and acting on the fear because in the past feeling fear would feel like, well, I did something wrong or I need to change something right away to make it stop and to be back on the right path. And that's just not necessarily the truth. The truth is sometimes doing the right thing or exactly what God's calling me to do, there is going to be fear because fear builds faith. And so, I can see where probably multiple times in your journey, you're with Tim and his health and raising the boys, there would be moments where you're like, "Whew, I just can't do this. I can't do it anymore. God, you're going to have to take the wheel." Jesus, take the wheel moments.
Absolutely. And, it's almost like clockwork where I will feel those feelings and then somebody will message me or somebody will call me. Just I had a call coming in right now, and I feel like because we're all so connected, we don't realize how connected we all are. And when one person feels a certain thing, when you're connected to people, you feel it with them or they feel your feelings so many times. And if you think of somebody, a lot of times that's the Lord saying, I think you should check in with them. So
Mhm,
I've been more obedient about that lately, where somebody will come into mind. It doesn't always have to be um, something tragic happening for somebody. Sometimes it's joyful. And they'll say, oh my gosh, you don't even know. You're the first to hear this. And then because I was obedient and I reached out to them, I got to be the first one to hear their happy news too. But a lot of times it can be a, wow, how did you know? I needed to hear from somebody today.
mhm,
And that's been true in my life where people have just messaged out of the blue. And I say, oh my goodness, you are just what I needed today. And I know without a doubt that the Lord sent that person to me at that specific moment because I needed somebody.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I can remember one time being on my knees in prayer beside the bed, um, and, just praying so fervently and needing a hug. And it was a time when Don was gone, and I don't remember if he was deployed or if this was a time when we were going through hard times in our marriage. I want to say it was hard times in our marriage. And I was just praying and I was just almost begging God, that I needed a hug so bad. And my oldest daughter came in my room and gave me a hug. And I just knew that was God answering my prayer and hearing my prayer. And I'm so grateful that He hears our prayers. Another thought that I had is linking back to what you were saying earlier about vulnerability and how we're all connected. We're so connected. And the fact that you have let other people in and be a part of your journey. And, I've seen other people go through hard, hard things and really close up and almost be ashamed and embarrassed and not want to take any help and have that kind of attitude. And they were so alone, and it didn't let other people share their gifts. And God asks us, He wants us to not just give money at church as a tithe, but, or giving, whichever you call it in your faith, but He wants us to be able to give in our everyday lives. Sometimes it is a hug, or it is a phone call, or a text, or even one of those silly little gifts, GIFs that we text someone and we connect. I have a friend that's so good at like knowing just the right one of those to send to make me laugh or make me feel like I did get a hug, or what have you. She just knows where all those are at just the right moment. And like you said, it doesn't have to cost a lot of money. That doesn't even cost a stamp, or, it's really just in the moment. I feel so loved because she sent me that little funny meme. Or Don, my husband, he'll sit and send reels to all the different ones in our family, and they're funny, and like, because of what he's picked, he knows you, and it's just another way
Beautiful.
that he can connect with us. So, um, I just really appreciate your spirit, and I see you live that out. I love that you garden. That's one of the things you and I have in common, is loving plants and gardening. And from gardening, I've thought about you and like, how do you do that? Because my husband tills the garden for me, and I know your son has tilled for you, but like when the boys were little, then, did maybe a neighbor come, or you're like, I don't know who did it until your boys were old enough, or maybe you did it. But it's just all those little things that, have to line up, in order for the things to happen that we need.
Right. And I will tell you that Tim used to be a lot more able bodied than he is. So he did a lot of that. And I have so many pictures of him and the boys planting the garden together. And, just a lot of times they would just plant it, which was beautiful. He tilled, they planted, and the boys have always been so helpful. And I have always appreciated that. But you reminded me of something that I would love to share from back in 2001, that it's one of the biggest life lessons I learned in that hard season. Is I had a friend who is a pastor's wife. She actually shared with me one time, she told me, I'd like to make meals for your family. And I said, oh my goodness, you don't have to do that. And she said, no, I want to. And I said, okay. So she did. And she made, I think, over 10 meals for us. Like every
Wow.
week she was and they were like gourmet meals. She was an excellent cook. She would make like the salad and the main dish and the dessert, and she would put cloth napkins in there.
Oh.
And it was just so nice. And every week I'd give her her dishes back and the cloth napkins, and she just wanted our family to have that. Well, after a while, I was feeling bad, and I said, you know what? You don't have to keep making meals for us, even though this was when Tim was at his lowest. And
Mm,
she said, I want to tell you something. She said, every one of us has certain things that we need to accomplish on this earth. And the Lord has told us what we need to do. And she said, one of the things he's told me is to make meals, and that way I minister to people. And she said, so if you tell me no and you block me being able to give meals, that is actually stopping the blessings and the flow of what he wants to happen on this earth.
mm,
And then I won't be fulfilling my mission. And you are stopping me from fulfilling that mission. And it
mm,
brings tears to my eyes when I think about it,
mm,
because she taught me such a beautiful lesson
mm,
of don't be a blessing blocker. So then that was the theme for corporate going into December. And that brought tears to my eyes too,
mm,
because think of the times all of us. when we have said no to someone, and maybe you have to for a certain reason, but if you continuously tell people no, you never know what blessings can come into their life because they were obedient and they did what the Lord asked them to do through them to you and out into this world. So I've learned to accept help when people offer it. And I have just learned that every one of us has a mission on this earth. And we don't always know what that mission is, but when we just keep listening to that still small voice, and the Lord said, I am leaving you, but I will give you a gift, and it's my Holy Spirit.
Mm,
And He indwells us, and
mm.
He's always talking to us, and He's always telling us the things that we need to do. We just need to listen and be obedient.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Stephanie.
Yeah.
And yeah, you're reminding me of sometimes when I feel prompted to do something and I know I need to get faster. A lot of times I do. I've had to learn that that is him prompting me. I just didn't realize it for a long time. Um, and then I want to get a little bit faster. um, having a little gift closet where you keep things that you can just give when you realize somebody needs encouragement. I think it's good to have, or a drawer, a cabinet. I mean, if you don't have a whole closet, that's fine. And having a little stash of cards, and again, doing what we can. If we can't stop and go visit or stop and, there's a lot of steps to getting a card in the mail. And I've spoken, I think, on this podcast recently about what a gift a card is because of all that's involved. But even someone taking time to send a text or make a phone call, what can I do? Like if I feel like I can't do this and that's what I felt prompted to do, maybe I am going to get that done. But what can I do in the interim? So I'm connecting with that person and they know they're special to me and they know that I'm thinking of them. My personality, I'm big to say, hey, let's get together. Or like as we were moving, I had planned when we had showings and had to be gone from the house that I was going to go make visits to certain people that wanted to see me again before I move. But I had never done this before, so I didn't know, how the time would flow and whatnot, and also what my son's needs would be because we are homeschooling him this year. And so it's played out a little bit differently than I thought it would. And there's some people that I still want to connect with and visit with. And so instead of just feeling like a failure and not connecting at all, looking at, well, what can I do to connect, and help them to know that I treasure them and my relationship with them. So thank you so much for exemplifying that and reminding us not to be a blessing blocker, sometimes to ourselves, because we feel like we're going to fail. We just don't start, and try and work with what we have. And then other times when someone wants to bless us, saying, no, don't do that for me, or, being a gift blocker or a blessing blocker. So thank you so much for joining me today on this episode. I feel like I have taken away so many treasure thoughts that you have shared with us, and just being able to be your friend and see your family and how y'all navigate this life and the journey that we're on so beautifully and with so much grace and love. Your friendship is truly a treasure.
Oh, I love you, Darlene. You are such a treasure to me, too. Thank you for having me on. It's been just so lovely, and I just have such a grateful heart.
Thank you for tuning in to You Are Significant. I hope this episode inspired you to embrace your own God given purpose. If this episode inspired you and blessed you, would you please share it out with a friend who needs to be reminded of their own significance? And remember to hit subscribe. Until next time, remember to walk in faith, find the joy, and stand in your significance.